Lazy Bee Cookies here, and today I'm going to show you real quick the different consistencies of my glaze, and also in respect to the royal icing, what it looks like and what the differences are. I usually just work with two different consistencies. One is for piping and the other one is for flooding. However, sometimes the flooding I need to use a slightly thinner consistency, especially when I want to do larger areas. It's just easier to pipe, and it will stay smoother, and hopefully I'll be able to show you the difference later on in a different video, what exactly that means. So let's start with the royal icing, because everybody's familiar with that, and I just mixed some up here and I colored it. If you're interested in the color, it is the straight from the bottle AmeriColor Violet. This is what this gives you. I always call it the Sophia the First color because it's a perfect color for her dress. Anyway, let's do the piping consistency first. And you all are familiar with the royal icing, so I don't really need to show you exactly what that looks like, but the piping consistency is more of a plop consistency, so it holds the shape really well and it stays at a peak, and you can write with it, you can outline with it. It's just an all-around great consistency. In a pinch, you could use this to flood if you needed to, but as you will see in one of my later videos, I had a little bit of trouble with this type of consistency, so I had to thin it down, especially when you're writing, for example, script writing. Then you want the piping consistency just a little bit thinner, but you all know that. So royal icing, cover it up. This is the piping consistency, and I will bring it out again once we compare the glaze to the royal icing. Now here, it's not for Friday. I labeled it Flood Royal Icing, so I know. All right, so this is the Flood Royal Icing, and it's probably, you could probably do this even a little bit thinner. I kind of like it this way because my hands are always warm, and it will immediately become looser. So I always have it at a little bit of a thicker consistency to start out with, but you can definitely go a little bit looser on the flood. This will give you a nice puffy flood, and also probably less craters. Okay, so let's bring out, since I have this out and open, grab another spatula. Let me show you the flood glaze. Okay, so this is royal icing. This is the glaze, FG flood glaze. I compare these two to about the same consistency, believe it or not, even though they react completely different. So here we go again. It kind of just, you have to help it off the spatula a little bit. And now here is the glaze. And I think I'm gonna switch the angle a little bit so it's easier for you guys to see. Hold on one second. Okay, so let's try again. So here we have the Glaze Flood, and I call this a thicker flood. And sometimes if I'm lazy, I don't outline my cookies with a different consistency. I just use this one, and it works. This would not work so well if you wanted to outline and then fill it in with a thinner consistency. All right, and then comparison here. This is the Royal Icing Flood. I would call this probably about a 15-second consistency. I'm not exactly sure. Okay, one more time. Here's the glaze. Now, if I would explain what the glaze feels like in comparison, it is a little bit more gooey. A little bit more gooey than the Royal Icing. That's the best way I could describe it, and that counts for all different kinds of consistencies. All right, so let me cover this up, and let me cover up the Royal Icing, because we all know Royal Icing doesn't like air. All right, so let me see. I have another color here that I need to thin down, and I'm going to show you how the super thin flood consistency of glaze looks like. Get a new spatula, and this is not mixed in well. It's kind of a skin color that I'm going to be using later on, so it's always good to have a spray bottle handy, so you can easily thin down your icing. So I'm just going to give this a good spray, because this came straight out of the mixer, and I want this really thin. And if you watched my previous video, I talk about how I mix my icing, and how the icing, I want the icing to start off a little bit thinner, so that I can thin it down, thicker, so I can thin it down later. Thicker is the key word, because in my opinion, it's easier to add water than to add powdered sugar. So when we say glaze is tricky to work with, part of the reason is it likes to sit for a little while before you work with it. For example, if I were to use this type of icing right away, I would get tons of bubbles. All right, so I could probably go even a little thinner, but because of my warm hands, I will leave it like that. And let's compare the other flood glaze that I showed you earlier. Now if I pick this up, oops, let's bring this in focus here. This is my thicker flood. See how it kind of ribbons, and it takes a little while to blend in. And this blends in right away. Let's give it another squirt. I mean, you know, royal icing, you work with thin icing like that too. So you just have to be careful once you start using it. You know, the moment you put your icing piping bag down, it starts to flow out of the icing bag. So I always have a glass handy, and I'll put the open bag in the glass container so it doesn't go all over my counter. There you go. That's a good loose flood. So this kind of flood I use when I do large areas on a cookie, when I need to pipe fast, when I need a super smooth surface for, let's say if I want to airbrush a stencil on top, this is what I would use. Okay, and this is actually a nice light skin color. It shows different on the camera, but this is how I achieved this with the AmeriColor Ivory and just a tiny little bit of soft pink. Oops, soft pink and ivory. All right, now the moment you start stirring the loose flood, you'll get all these bubbles. So this is gonna have to sit for a good while, because even if I pop them on the surface, they'll still come up to the surface and they will appear on your cookie. So we're just gonna let this one rest until I need it. Now notice how I haven't really closed this one up. I haven't covered it up or anything, and it has not crusted. This is one of the nice things about glaze, because it takes so long to dry. You can leave this container open for quite a while and uncovered, and you can go right back to it. It will not crust over. However, if it does, I usually just give it a little squirt of water, just a tiny little bit. Leave it, let it sit on the surface, and then I mix it after about 5 minutes. But even now, when I mix this, I have mixed it pretty well. There is a lot less air bubbles in this type of consistency. So that's always good to know. All right, moving on to the piping consistency. It's not really a piping consistency for glaze, because you can't really work with that type of piping consistency like you would with the royal icing. All right, so I have PG, piping consistency glaze, and PRI, piping consistency royal icing. And let me clean up my spatula real quick. Okay, piping consistency royal icing, this type I would use for like little dots, so we don't get the air bubbles and the holes, the craters. So this is really thick. I would use this for outlining. I would use this for maybe just a straight kind of writing, nothing that has a script or a brush stroke, because this would be too hard. But it's really stiff. It plops into the bowl, and that is the firm icing. Okay, piping consistency royal icing here. This is not thick enough for roses or other flowers. You might be able to use this one for leaves, but like toothpick roses or other types of flowers, this would not. You would have to thicken this royal icing up quite a bit. All right. And I have to cover this up, because the moment I leave it out, it's gonna crust over. Piping consistency glaze. Now let's see what this looks like. And I just added a little bit more in here. That's why it's not mixed in. The color is not mixed in as well. It might be a little bit lighter. So this is my piping consistency glaze. Totally different. Royal icing. Doesn't want to come off my spatula. Here it comes, plop. Piping consistency royal. Hold on. Piping consistency glaze. And I really only use this if I need to outline and fill in with this thin consistency here. Or if I want a little bit more, dimensions. If you know, people talk about the puffy icing, how neat it looks. If you need puffy icing, you can use this kind, but it's just really hard to pipe out. So I will show you in another video how this works with when I pipe it on a cookie. Okay, so there you have it. This is my stiff piping royal icing that I use for outlining. And this is my thinner, medium flood. Oh, did I say royal icing? I meant glaze, sorry. This is all glaze. This is my flood glaze for like smaller areas. Okay, flood glaze, pipe glaze. Does not come off the spatula very easy. Pipe glaze, flood glaze. What should we call this one? Super flood glaze? I don't know. There you go. Here, let me move these. My viewfinder is not very big. Here you go. Lots of bubbles. Like this is flooding consistency for big areas, large cookies. Okay, that's it. I hope it made sense. If you need any more information about it, leave me a comment down below. Like up this video and stay tuned for my next section where I will show you how to pipe with the different consistencies in royal icing and in glaze, and also we will flood cookies in royal icing and in glaze, so you can see the difference. Okay, thanks a bunch, and I will see you later.